The Forbidden Lands don't feel alive in the way other Monster Hunter regions feel alive. They feel awake, like a giant animal that never fully went to sleep after Wyveria fell and is now rolling its shoulders, testing its lungs, trying to remember how to breathe in a body that's been broken for 2,000 years. You notice it first in the way the sky changes. Not just rain starts or wind picks up, but whole phases flipping like a switch. Calm turns to violence. Violence turns to abundance. Abundance turns to quiet again, and every creature in the land behaves as if it's hearing a signal you don't yet understand. That's the hook for episode 4. In Wilds, weather isn't background. Weather is the steering wheel. If you're used to older Monster Hunters, that's already unsettling. Weather used to be mood, obstacle, spice. In Wilds, it is structure. It decides what monsters roam, where herds move, which apex is crowned, and when the land becomes lethal. It doesn't just affect ecology, it is ecology. And once you accept that, a much bigger question forces its way into view. Who or what is driving the weather? Because storms this precise don't look like nature improvising. They look like a system issuing commands. Before we go further, quick and sincere pause. If these long-form deep dives are landing for you and you'd like the whole Wild season in this same style, a like and a subscribe help a lot. It's the simplest way to tell YouTube that Monster Hunter lore deserves this kind of slow, story-first treatment, and it keeps the series rolling. And I'd really love to know what other games or worlds you want explored next, so drop a comment with your picks. I'm building what comes after Wilds right now, and your suggestions shape that roadmap more than anything else. Thanks for being here. Back to the storms. So tonight, we're solving one core puzzle. Why do the Forbidden Lands cycle through fallow inclemency and plenty so cleanly, and what does that reveal about the ancient machine underneath the continent? We already have the outline from the first 3 episodes. Wyveria built the Evertorch. The Landspine distributed its energy. Guardian constructs acted as artificial stability tools. The whole continent was, for a while, a managed ecosystem, not a wild one. Then the system broke. The Evertorch leaked. The Landspine fractured, Guardians went feral, and humans like the Keepers survived by learning the pulses rather than fighting them. Episode 4 is where we face the living consequence of that history. The land is still running the old program. Let's start with what the game shows us directly, because Wilds makes sure everyone understands the phases as a gameplay feature. You have a calm state where the land feels dry and still. A dangerous storm state with lightning, sandstorms, torrential floodbursts, or abrasive winds depending on the biome. Then, an abundant state where life surges. Herds return, plants bloom, resources sparkle out of the earth, and dulled colors become lush again. The map itself tells you what phase you're in, because it impacts everything you do. Here's the first clue hiding in plain sight. These phases are not random. They are structured. You can predict them. The game gives you signals. Herds begin moving ahead of storms. Certain predators appear as if they're waiting for the weather to crown them. Certain materials only surface in plenty, as if the land's veins are opening on schedule. And across multiple biomes, the same 3-state logic repeats. That's already a red flag, because real meteorology doesn't work that way. Ecosystems have cycles, yes, but they're nested inside many layers: seasonal shifts, rainfall patterns, temperature bands, geological events, and chaotic variation. Even in a fantasy world, you'd expect different regions to have different rhythms. But the Forbidden Lands share a single rhythm. It's like multiple organs beating to one metronome. So evidence beat, one is simple. The Forbidden Lands weather cycles are synchronized and predictable, functioning like a continent-wide system rather than a set of independent climates. Now we ask, what does that imply? It implies that the phases are driven by something below the sky. Something that can affect multiple modern biomes at once. Something that doesn't depend on air currents or solar tilt. Something engineered. And we already know what that something is because the story names it later: the Landspine and the Evertorch. The Landspine is an arterial network designed to distribute Wyverian bioenergy. Wilk, the white crystalline milk that leaks from it, is basically the land expressing energy surplus and imbalance. When Wilk floods a biome, the biome changes. The soil changes, the vegetation changes, monsters react differently. Some thrive, some retreat, some mutate or adopt more aggressive patterns. Wilds doesn't frame this like a footnote. It frames it like the core function of the continent. The sky isn't deciding when plenty comes, the Evertorch is. That brings us to evidence beat 2. Phase shifts correlate with energy flow through the land spine. When the grid surges or flood zones with Wilk, storms rise. When the flow stabilizes, plenty follows. At this point, we're not guessing. We're reading the world's logic. The weather is essentially a visible indicator of what the old Wyverian machine is doing underground. Now let's zoom into a concrete biome example, because Wilds uses each region to show a different face of the same core mechanism. Take the Windward Plains. In fallow, it's a harsh, open landscape where visibility is good, but resources are scarce and herds move cautiously. Apex predators patrol but don't fully commit to dominance. You get a sense of latent tension, like the land is holding its breath. Then, inclemency lands, lightning storms and sand surges sweep the plains. The ground becomes treacherous, the horizon fractures, and suddenly the apex structure shifts. Monsters that were playing at dominance now become hyper-territorial. New threats surface. Herds huddle and migrate in programmed routes. Even the way smaller creatures behave changes, as if the storm state is a world with different rules. Then, plenty arrives. The chaos recedes. The plains bloom. Water returns to channels. Herds spread out and reclaim grazing territory. Species diversity spikes. And for a time, the ecosystem looks healthy. It appears balanced. This is our third evidence beat. Each biome's 3 phases form a complete ecological loop. Scarcity builds tension, storms apply pressure and reorganize dominance, abundance resets and redistributes life. That loop is too neat to be accidental. It looks like an engineered feedback routine, a way to flush the system, vent pressure, and then fertilize recovery. If you've ever seen how giant industrial systems regulate heat, alternating cycles of load, venting, and cooling, it feels weirdly similar. Fallow accumulates ecological load. Inclemency vents it through violent redistribution. Plenty cools and restores the system with a burst of nutrients. Then the loop repeats. Wyveria didn't invent nature, but it did overlay a regulator on nature, and Wilds is showing you that the regulator still spins. Now, you may be thinking, sure, the phases are linked to energy flow. That's already in the story. But what makes them a weapon, and why are they so important? Because the phases don't just passively happen, they choose winners. Inclemency is not a neutral storm state. It's an ecological filter. During storms, only certain species can operate effectively. Those adapted to low visibility, those with raw power, those able to exploit chaos. Those species become temporary kings. Others retreat, hide, or are pushed into migration corridors they don't normally occupy. This creates new predator-prey overlaps, new territorial conflicts, and new evolutionary pressures. In plenty, the winners rotate again. Species that thrive in stable abundance rise. Herbivore herds expand aggressively. Medium predators reclaim hunting grounds. Some apex monsters lose advantage and retreat to edges until the next storm gives them a window again. This constant crown switching stops any one species from over-dominating for too long. It keeps apex hierarchies fluid. It ensures the ecosystem doesn't freeze into a single stable but brittle configuration. Read that the way Wyveria would read it, as a civilization running a managed world. If you're trying to prevent runaway apex dominance and elder scale buildup, you want the top of the food web to rotate. You don't want permanent kings. Permanent kings become hoarders of energy, hoarders become system threats, and system threats are exactly what Wyveria built Arkveld to trim. So here's the key implication. The storms are not a side effect of the machine. They are part of the machine's stabilizing logic. They are the continent's built-in anti-dominance routine. Weather is a weapon because it targets dominance without a hunter ever lifting a blade. Now the story gets even more interesting when we consider what changed after Wyveria fell. Wyveria's regulator was designed for a world where a controlling civilization could tune the grid. They could decide when to surge energy. They could correct if storms became too intense. They had guardians like Arkveld to cut down anomalies. But the controlling hand is gone. The machine still runs, but it runs damaged. The land spine leaks. Wilk flow is unstable. Guardians wake on blind loops. That means the storms aren't just stabilizing routines anymore. They're routines firing without calibration. In a controlled system, a pressure release storm is helpful. In a broken system, a pressure release storm becomes violent and unpredictable. It might release too much, it might come too often. It might surge energy into places that can't absorb it. It might crown apexes in unnatural sequence. That is exactly what Wilds shows you in the escalation of phases as the story progresses. Early storms are survivable. Later storms feel like the land is climbing toward a fever. The timing feels tighter. The severity feels sharper. The apex ladder accelerates. The land isn't just cycling, it's straining. So now we have what we need to form tonight's core theory. But before we reveal it cleanly, let's dig into a few small observations that become huge once this lens is in place. First, the herds. Wilds gives you roaming megafauna herds on a scale Monster Hunter hasn't done in mainline form before, and they don't behave like props. They have roots, they have leaders, they react to phase shifts in coordinated ways. They move early, sometimes hours before inclemency hits, as if they're reading a signal in the ground or in the air that you can't perceive. That means one of two things. Either the animals have evolved a deep instinct for these storms over countless generations, or the storms have a predictable precursor embedded in the energy grid that the animals can sense. Given what we know about Wilk and landspine pulses, the second option makes more sense. Herds aren't predicting weather like old farmers. They're reacting to bioenergy fluctuations. Their bodies feel the continent's heartbeat. So the herds are a living barometer for the machine. Second, apex patrol patterns. If you watch apexes across phases, they don't simply get more aggressive in storms. They often reposition to places that make sense only if they're exploiting storm logic. They guard funnels. They ambush migration routes. They seize high ground that is useless in plenty, but decisive in inclemency. They behave like these storms are the real arena they've adapted to. This suggests that apex evolution in the Forbidden Lands has been shaped long-term by phase cycling. The storms are not new. They are the inheritance of Wyverian regulation, old enough to become the ecological norm. So apexes are not just strong monsters. They're storm specialists. They are adapted to a system of periodic upheaval. Third, resource surfacing. Plenty doesn't just make the land pretty, it makes certain high-value resources erupt from the environment. Plants bloom unusually fast, minerals glitter on cliff walls that were barren in fallow. You can read this purely as gameplay economy. But inside the story lens, it looks like Wilk flooding and then cooling. The grid dumps energy, then pulls back, leaving biological and mineral deposits behind. That's not a random good season, it's a machine fertilization cycle. Put those three micro patterns together and you get a deeper supporting beat. Everything in the Forbidden Lands, animals, apexes, and resources behaves like it is tuned to an underlying energy pulse. Now we're ready for the clean reveal. Here it is. Wild's storm cycles are the residual control system of Wyveria's Evertorch grid. They were originally engineered as a continent-wide stabilizer to prevent permanent apex dominance and elder-scale buildup. In the present, with the grid damaged and leaking, those cycles are firing too hard and too wild, turning a stabilizer into a weapon that is slowly pushing the ecosystem toward another collapse. That's the heart of Episode 4, and it reframes the entire middle arc of Wilds. The phases aren't just weather, they're the land trying to regulate itself. Inclemency is the machine's immune surge. Plenty is its recovery. Fallow is its load phase. And this immune surge is getting worse. Now we need to ask why it's getting worse, because that's where the plot tension really hooks into the lore. There are two layers to this escalation. Layer 1, the grid is failing physically. Every time the landspine leaks or fractures, energy flow becomes less efficient and more spiky. Think of a damaged artery. Instead of smooth circulation, you get erratic bursts and clots. The storms become harsher because the energy pulses driving them are harsher. Plenty becomes more extreme because recovery requires larger dumps of nutrients. Layer 2, the ecology is feeding the failure. As storms intensify, apexes become more violent. As apexes become more violent, they hoard more energy and territory. That hoarding stresses Wilk flow and phase timing. That stress triggers stronger storms. Stronger storms crown harsher apexes. The loop tightens. This is the feedback spiral Wyveria feared. The one Arkveld was built to trim. The one Xo'Shia ultimately embodied. Wilds is showing you the early stages of that spiral returning. And every major story beat you encounter, every guardian rising, every phase accelerating, every apex ladder cracking, makes more sense when you realize the real antagonist is not an individual monster. It's a system racing into runaway mode. Let's put that into emotional terms, because that's what makes viewers lean in. Imagine you live in a valley where every few weeks the sky turns into a weapon, not a rare catastrophe, but a known phase. Your grandparents survived it, your parents survived it, you learn to survive it. You build storage for fallow, you route herds for inclemency, you harvest plenty quickly because you know it won't last. You don't try to control the storm, you try to live in its rhythm. That's the keeper's world. Now imagine the storms begin coming faster, harsher, less predictable. The rhythm you trusted your whole life starts sliding. The storm phase lasts longer. The plenty phase becomes shorter. Apexes begin appearing in new places. Herd routes become dangerous. You feel the land's heartbeat racing. That's the moment Wilds begins. So when Nutter tells you the White Wraith appeared and his village was attacked, it wasn't a random spike of bad luck. It was one more symptom that the cycle is escalating past what the keepers have been able to ride for generations. Arkveld wakes because the machine is stressed. Storms intensify because the machine is stressed. Guardian constructs surface because the machine is stressed. They are all different expressions of the same illness. Now, you might wonder, if storms are part of the stabilizer, why would they ever become a weapon against humans or against life in general? Because the stabilizer doesn't care about individual suffering, it cares about system survival. In a machine world, the highest priority is to keep energy flow stable and dominance rotating. If that requires brutal storms that cull weaker species, so be it. If it requires apex wars that thin the top of the chain, so be it. The stabilizer is indifferent to the moral scale we use. It is a functional immune response, not a human one. When the system is healthy, that indifference produces a resilient ecosystem. When the system is sick, that indifference becomes catastrophic. This is how weather becomes a weapon, not because someone aims it at you, but because its targeting logic is blunt and has no hand on the dial anymore. Now, let's address something that often confuses players, and that your video can clarify in a way that sticks. Why do the storms feel like they want certain monsters? Because they do. In a biological system, storms are a stress test, and stress tests pick specialists. The specialists rise, hoard, and are eventually cut down by the next stress test. That's the rotation. In Wilds, this rotation is so visible that it reads like intention. But the intention isn't personal, it's systemic. The storms are trying to prevent the ecosystem from locking into dominance. They are trying to keep the energy grid from being monopolized by one apex. That's why they gift windows to certain species and crush others beneath the same clouds. Again, this is not a side effect. It's the stabilizer doing its job. Now, to keep this episode honest, we need to consider a counter theory. A reasonable alternative is that the storm phases are entirely natural, just unusually dramatic in the Forbidden Lands. Fans could argue that the continent has a one-of-a-kind geology that produces cyclical superstorms. Maybe due to ocean currents, magnetic anomalies, or elder dragon presence. In that view, the phases are a natural adaptation the ecology has built around, not a Wyverian machine echo. This counter-theory isn't silly. Monster Hunter worlds are full of exaggerated natural phenomena. Elders cause climate shifts. Regions often have unique weather rules, but it struggles to explain three key facts. First, the synchronization across biomes. Natural superstorm cycles wouldn't line up identically across deserts, forests, and highlands unless something beneath them was coordinating the timing. Second, the direct coupling between energy leakage and phase intensity. Wilk floods don't just happen during storms. They feel like the engine that causes the storms. Third, the historical continuity with Wyveria's known infrastructure. A civilization capable of continent-scale energy tuning didn't build on top of a random storm machine by coincidence. It almost certainly was the storm machine. So while purely natural cycles might have existed as a base rhythm, the three-phase regulator Wilds shows us is inseparable from the Evertorch grid. In short, nature may have had a pulse, but Wyveria put that pulse on a schedule. Now we get to the aftershock. Why this matters beyond Wilds' moment-to-moment plot. Because once you see storms as an old stabilizer going feral, you start seeing Monster Hunter's entire world differently. You start asking whether other regions might also be sitting on remnants of ancient regulation. Whether the elder dragons we've fought across generations were not random invaders, but responses to energy imbalance. Whether the guild's conservation rules are not just philosophy, but an inherited attempt to prevent exactly these spirals from repeating. Wilds is telling you that the ancient catastrophe didn't end. It became a quiet, slow, semi-stable, long winter across the world. Most regions healed enough for humans to live normally. The Forbidden Lands did not. They stayed closer to the heart of the old machine. That's why their weather still speaks in Wyverian language. This also reframes your role as a hunter in wilds. You're not entering a wilderness to remove a single big threat. You're entering a system to learn how not to destabilize it further. Every hunt you do is a poke into an ancient feedback loop. Every apex you remove is a lever on a machine you don't fully control. Every guardian you awaken might be a safety tool firing because you're already too late. That's why your expedition feels different from older monster hunter stories. The stakes aren't save the village from the monster. The stakes are stop a continent from falling back into its death spiral. And that makes the guild's behavior in wilds make even more sense. They aren't just hunting Arkveld because it's dangerous. They're hunting Arkveld because it's a warning light. When a failsafe wakes, you don't just fight the failsafe. You ask what triggered it. When storms intensify, you don't just brace for weather. You ask what the grid is doing underground. When apex ladders accelerate, you don't just enjoy a bigger boss roster. You ask whether the ecosystem is slipping into the same runaway dominance that once summoned Zoshia. Wilds is basically a story about reading symptoms. Now we're ready to bridge to the next episode, because a good lore season always leaves the audience with one sharper question than the last. If wild storms are the stabilizer going feral, then what is the stabilizer trying to correct right now? We know Arkveld was a reset tool. We know the phases are reset tools. Reset tools fire when dominance spikes and energy hoards. So, what is spiking? Is it a natural apex arms race pushed by Wilk leakage? Is it a deeper Guardian awakening chain set off by the grid's damage? Is it something elder class, older, stirring beneath the land spine?